My name is Pablo Guardiola. I work at Mapbox as a software engineer. I'm in the mobile navigation team. And as you may know, we are a data allocation platform for developers. And that means that we are offering all kind of location-related services. Such as navigation, maps, and things like that. And also, I want to mention that we are hiring, so please reach to me at the end of the talk if you are interested. But anyways, today I'm not going to talk about Mapbox. Actually, I'm gonna talk about automated documentation and specifically automated documentation with Ank. And what is Ank? Ank basically it is a tool for compile time documentation, verification, and evaluation for Kotlin and Java. And fun fact is that Ank is inspired by the awesome docs and tutorial tool from Scala, which is called Tut, which is the short of Tutankhamun, and Ankh actually it is the sister and wife of Tutankhamun, and also the logo is a pyramid, so it's all related. But anyways, Ankh it is like a very simple documentation tool for Kotlin and Java. Actually, it is a Gradle plugin. Which basically reads some markdowns that you can write as your documentation, and those markdown files should include some snippets of code that we are gonna take them and we are gonna compile them and also evaluate them. And then we will be generating new markdown files, which will include the results from those evaluations. And then those markdown files could be used as a source for your documentation side. And obviously, the good point about Ang is that these all, think of generating and compiling and evaluating and such happens at compile time, which means that we can ensure that what you have typed is gonna work. So the point here is that the developers that see this documentation in your site could basically copy and paste the snippets of code, and they should work. And also, as I mentioned, this could run as a part of your CI, which means that you can ensure that if you have introduced any breaking change in your APIs, you will be somehow notified because the build will fail. So you can ensure that your documentation is always up to date. Moving on, Ank is built on top of Arrow. So basically, is using Arrow to write the code for Ank, but this is agnostic to the developer that uses the tool. But I wanted to mention that it is built on top of Arrow, which is type functional programming companion object, which means that you can. Basically, it includes a bunch of data types and abstractions from functional programming that allow you to write pure functional apps and also libraries. So let me, in order to explain you how it works, basically, I'm gonna show you like the option documentation from Arrow, and you will see what you can get. So this is the option documentation from Arrow. As you may know, option is how is modeled by Arrow the presence and absence. So if you are not familiar with this data type, basically you have the option which accepts a container of type A, and then if there is a value of this type, then you will get this sum object, and if there's no value, then you will get none. This is how normally how nullability is handled by functional programming. This is the result, as you can see. Now let's see this in action. As I said before, Anc provides a bunch of modifiers. The very basic one is no modifier, which is the one that you will be using by default, which basically will take this snippet of code and then we'll compile it, and then we'll basically print the result out. So basically, you will be adding as any other, markdown tags. You will be adding first of all the language, then colon Anc, and then you will be adding the imports, the expression that you want to show, and finally the result. So for example, if we change this and we say I'm at droidcon set, and then we go here and run Anc for the documentation. You will be getting the new result, right? Moving on, this is the like the very basic modifier, and as you have seen, this is what you will write as part of your snippets documentation, and then this is what you get. Another example, this is the same, but I wanted to show you that you will be getting none if you use the none as option. But sometimes this is you might want a definition that without noise. Imagine that you don't want to show the result, because as you have seen here, we are appending the result as the last part of the snippet. But could be, in some situations you don't want to do that, because maybe it is pretty straightforward for the developer to read. So you will use in that case the silent option. And in order to see this in action, we could add this here, and then if we run Ank again, and then where's the pointer? And refresh the site. Now we are not getting the result printed out. So it's the same. Another cool modifier that we have implemented is the replace one, which basically allows replacing like the entire snippet with the result of a function in this case. So basically, the result of the evaluation will be printed as as the result of the snippet, which is really cool because in this case we are generating automatically these tables which in combination with the arrow reflect module, which is basically letting you know what are the types. Like it is adding like introspection facilities to get information of the metadata of this object. So you can know at compile time what the type classes are included on its module. And this is what this is basically doing is we have this function that it is generating basically like a markdown table and getting the info from the arrow reflect module to fill the rows. Another one pretty similar to the previous one is the out file modifier, which basically does the same, but in this case replaces the code fence entirely with an empty string, but it is creating a file for you and putting the evaluation result into that file. So you can build things like that, like automated, which in this case we are also using the arrow reflect module to get the hierarchy of every data type and type class, and this is generating a file which then is consumed by a JS library, which it is the one in charge of rendering the diagram. But again, the point here is that all processing of this is done at compile time, which is nice, and only the rendering is done at the runtime actually. Moving on, all the modifiers that I have mentioned also work in Java. The only thing that you need to do is to change the language at the beginning, and also, of course, don't forget the semicolons, but you will be getting the same. And of course, if there is something that doesn't work, you can always use the like the plain modifier and use it in your Markdown snippets, like only adding Java or Kotlin, and that code will be formatted as so. As well, we are also adding some errors output. So imagine imagine that you have missed to add the imports of this snippet, and then when you run ang, you will be getting an errors output, which is actually telling you what Markdown documentation file has failed, and also where, and we are also including the compiler error. So it is it should be pretty straightforward to find what went wrong and then fix it. And again, and sorry if I'm insisting, but the good part about it is that this all happens at compile time. Moving on, this is already done. The setup. So it is a very basic setup. This is, as I mentioned, this is a Gradle plugin. So basically, you will need to add the repository in the build the script block, and then add the dependency to the arrow ang Gradle, and this should be all done in the root build Gradle file. And then obviously you will need to apply the plugin on every module that you want to run ang on. And finally, you will be adding the core dependency, and you will be configuring what are the source and target and class path. And as you can imagine, when you run ang with this documentation, we'll process all the files that are included in the source folder, in this case, source main docs. And after compiling and evaluating them, it will, as I mentioned, it will generate new ones with the results into this target folder. And also you will be including the class path, so you don't get any error from missing classes or whatever. And in this case, we are adding the dependencies that you would have defined here in your dependencies block. Of course, we have run into some pitfalls and issues. One of it is this one that the Kotlin script engine becomes incrementally slower. This is a bug that basically I haven't went into the specifics, but basically what we are doing with ang is we are using a script engine for Kotlin and Java behind the scene, which basically allows us to take some snippets of code and compile them and evaluate them. And we found like there is a bug which loses the how many variables has counted and then enters in an endless loop. But this is already reported, so as soon as it gets solved, it will work in Ang. We especially found this issue when working with async code and coroutines, but hopefully it will get fixed soon, so we won't run into any issues. For those snippets of code right now, as I mentioned before, we are not, there are some cases in which we are not adding them to be processed with Ang. Another pitfall is that KAPT can run over Markdown. So annotations can be run as part of the Ang snippets. But as you can imagine, you can always use the annotation processor in a different module, and then use the sources that the annotation processor generates with Ang, because as I mentioned, all the dependencies are included in the class path, so you should be good. So this is not such a limitation in that case. Another one is that this is especially one that I'm obsessed to get in. Right now, Ang doesn't work in Android, but this is basically because the JSR implementations lack of some extra classes that Android needs to be executed. But as I mentioned, this is something that we are working hard on, and we will get Android support soon. Another one is that we have received some comments, I would say, that Ang is slow, which is not true, because actually Ang is as fast as it can be. But as I mentioned, the problem here is that like the script engines that we are using the behind the scenes. So because like most of the time it's basically consumed by compiling and evaluating. So the good part here is that we have reached the JetBrains guys, and we know that they are working on improving the repo, and therefore the Kotlin script engine will be improved as well. So basically, as those improve, so will Ang. Another thing to mention here is that although Ang supports both the tutorial mode, which is basically you could define the imports or at the beginning, or even define some declarations of variables in different snippets, and then they will be remembered. And also supports the docs mode, which is basically what you will do when you only write one snippet of code per Markdown file. Obviously, although those modes are supported, it is better to stick with the docs one because basically it means like less operations, and then it'll be faster because you don't need to basically the script engine doesn't need to recalculate what the variables are defined and what aren't. So I encourage you to use the docs mode as much as possible. And we have seen this. Basically, you will be adding the module name and then run Ank. And what about how to publish the docs in the GitHub pages? So you may know that GitHub pages is running Gecko. So basically, as we are generating Markdown files, it is pretty straightforward to use GitHub pages, and you can build easily your own documentation site. But in order to publish the docs automatically on every build of your CI, you could use the Gradle Git publish plugin, which then you can configure as this, like saying your repo, the branch, and what contents you want to include as part of that push. So basically, you will be adding this, or let's say piping this if Ank runs well. Then as next step, you will be running this git publish push command, which basically is doing a push automatically for you. Although it is true that if you use Travis, you could add a deploy step, which does basically the same. Moving on, what are we working on, and what's the future of Ank? We are right now. This is something that there is an open PR from yesterday. We are now trying to use Docker plus Kotlin Playground. So basically, Docker is the tool that you will use as like similar to Javadoc but for Kotlin. And also, the great thing about this is that it parses the results into Markdowns. And as you have noticed, we are processing Markdown files. So it is pretty straightforward to get the documentation as Markdown and put it on your GitHub page. But also we are trying to include the Kotlin Playground, which basically it allows you to create Kotlin aware editors capable of running HTML snippet of code. So as you can imagine, this is something that because we are using Kotlin Ank to automate everything, we could generate the boilerplate that is needed for the Kotlin program. And I wanted to show you how that looks like. So basically, we had to basically fork the try Kotlin repo, and then we included the arrow dependencies. This is not straightforward, but we have spoken with Hadi from JetBrains, and this is something that they are going to work on, and we will be able to let's say inject like external dependencies into the try Kotlin repo in a friendly way. So it will be easier, even easier to use the Kotlin playground with your own libraries. But as you can see here, this is I can't even see, but we can type here like droidcon SF, and then you can actually run this in your site. This is really great because your users could be playing with your APIs right away, like in a in a friendly and safer environment. Yeah, and we are actually using Ank to generate some of the boilerplate that is needed to do that. What else? Android support, as I mentioned before, I'm especially interested in getting this in. We have tried though many approaches, and those didn't work. And one thing that I'm gonna try next is trying to use this script engine, which is Rhino Android from Firefox, and see if adding this dependency in Ank makes Android to work. But there are some other limitations that for now we need to run this using Android Studio 3.3 and also Kotlin 1.3. So we need to keep experimenting with this. But as a goal, I want to get this in because that there are like a bunch of Android libraries that could be benefit from using Ank in their documentation. Also, we are thinking on some new modifiers, as the compile one, which basically mean that it only compile and it'll get rid of the evaluation part. And there are then some short tasks, like cleaning up the resources when a run fails, and other smaller tasks that we need to work on. But yeah, as I said, we think that Ank needs to take care of all of the documentation and tedious tasks, and try to automate them as much as possible. And you only care about making the best documentation that your users could have. And yeah, if you like what I said, we want to make type functional programming even easier. So please go about this tip number 87, in which we are trying to bring type classes as a feature of Kotlin. So type classes including in the language itself. And of course, if you try the tool and you find any issue or you have any questions, contributions are more than welcome. We are at Gitter, and also we are in the Kotlin Slack in the Arrow channel. And I also want to mention that we are like an inclusive community, and we do offer like one-on-one sessions for people that are interested in helping. So please, if you are interested, and we don't care about your level, it'll always be someone that will try to help you. So please, join us. Happy to answer some questions now, but if you are not sure, please stop by these communication channels, and we will be more than happy to assist you and share knowledge. And that should be all. Thank you. And if you have questions, please let me know.